Jocko comes in, that he thought that the only way that he could beat their record is getting more kills.
There was actually some really revolting and outrageous things being said about me, being said about my task unit bruiser, accusations of war crimes and reckless behavior and getting Americans killed. And it was disgusting.
It's been a few weeks. The Jocko drama has continued on as he's not released only one podcast as a rebuttal against the claims against him. He actually had to release a second one because people were so pissed off that he did not directly answer a lot of the, I don't even know, there was so much stuff going on that Jocko couldn't even do it in 3 hours and people were pissed off. Question, answer, that's all people wanted, and that's not what they got with a lot of this podcast. Let's TLDR this thing. You should watch the last video because I'm telling you, the allegations are in the beyond 10 plus whatever, that you should go through that entire thing and see what Eric is talking about in his claims against Jocko. I'll run it down here. Now, in my past video, I talked about the Green Beret Chronicles and Eric, which made a podcast, which were trying to out Jocko Willink over his efforts while in Ramadi, and essentially saying that he was reckless and that there were war crimes that should be held against him, and famous sniper Chris Kyle over how he conducted themselves and were taking out innocent people on local populations. I will be honest that I could not debunk everything with past experience from Jocko, as some of the podcasts are several hours long, and he does reference some of them, and I will go back to those, along with the one that he does talk about directly towards Eric as well. My goal for this video is to align what Eric Deming said and one-on-one show what Jocko says against that so you guys can make a direct comparison. Jocko in his podcast does a lot of all over the place, and you would have to write down like I did to actually see where he addresses every issue here, which I think was what people were looking for and they were never going to actually get. The first accusation or question from Eric Deming on this entire topic was this. Why would Eric want to do this and out Jocko? As mentioned previously, Eric has no social media following. This was noted in my video where I looked and did research on Eric. There is no podcast, there's no book, there's no videos, there's no Instagram, there is nothing. And even from those initial claims, there has been nothing. So it's been, I would say in this way, I guess you could say an ambush, but this is what Jocko had to say about that.
This is the thing with rumors. People like to be in the know. They like to be in the know. So they claim or they comment that they heard that too. Or they had an uncle in the army that said the same thing, or had an older brother in the Marine who was there and he said the same thing, or my best friend was a SEAL. But what's interesting here is that anyone who is actually in the know knows that this was impossible. But that's what this despicable video claims.
My assumption of this is that Eric is trying to represent the silent group of the Navy SEALs, which we saw was against people like Mr. Bolin, John coming out and talking about his SEAL experience. There is a silent amount that are telling people, shut up. And that is what I think is being resonated through Eric Deming in his comments and his claims against Jocko. And these people probably don't want to come out because they feel like it's against the ethos of what Navy SEALs should be, which are silent professionals. My other analysis of this is that if you had every silent professional across the board come out against Jocko, this would be fragmented. And just like what you see with SA, I have to say that word, just SA, but you can understand like Bill Crosby, and multiple people come out, it kind of gets fragmented. It's like, are people just dogpiling? It gets lost in this. And I think this more direct, succinct attack or ambush against Jocko's character is kind of an easier way to play this out than it is across the entire board. But I would understand that these individual people should say their entirety of what they experienced with Jocko or Chris Kyle on these matters. Now, to get into what the executive officer was talking about as Jocko was not working with them and other fellow leadership in the special operations community was not looking to have anything to do with conventional forces and saw themselves as a higher entity, and they were pretty much ruffling the feathers of the local population and the local leaders in this area. And this is what Jocko had to say on his 37-minute clarification.
It then goes on to say, and here's a quote, "It was obvious that they were not only directed to act in the manner which they did, but were also protected by their leadership because the combined leadership of 3-8, that's the 3-8 Marines, and other local units were reporting Bruiser's wild and wanton acts of violence to their own chain of command as they were resulting in Marines getting killed in retribution attacks. But our reports fell on deaf ears, end quote. Any reports like this of us behaving in this manner, we would have been stopped immediately. We wouldn't have done any more operations. Investigations would have been launched. I would have been arrested. And this is what the claim is here. Just imagine this, that all the Marine leadership is being told that war crimes are being committed and their Marines are getting killed as a result of it, but no one's going to listen to that. We lost 36 Marines. The vast majority of those losses were only in the middle months of deployment when Task Unit Bruiser was present, end quote. An outstanding unit assigned to one of the worst sectors in Ramadi, who fought a determined enemy valiantly and suffered greatly and took significant casualties, but they did not lose 36 Marines. During their deployment, they lost 17 Marines, and that includes one of their Navy corpsmen, one of their docks. 6 of those Marines, including one of their docks, 6 of them were killed between March 31st and April 6th during what the 3-8 Marines call their Hell Week in Ramadi. And that was before Task Unit Bruiser even arrived in Ramadi. So the highest concentration of Marines killed in Ramadi took place before Task Unit Bruiser even arrived in Ramadi.
Now, I have to let you guys know that from this report, I cannot locate it anywhere. If Jocko's team, somebody that's part of that, would let me look at that or know where they can find it, I've not found anything. As somebody that's trying to show every angle of this, which is also why I'm making this follow-up video, so everybody can see this from a 360-degree angle as best that they can, even though we know there's a silent group that's out there that you can't get every aspect, but trying to get as much out there as possible. Also wanted to note from the editing bay that if this letter was written by a random person and submitted, I would understand that being possibly false. However, why would somebody go above and beyond to fake a letter to this degree to try and make Jocko look bad? And if so, where is this letter coming from exactly? Because that was one thing that was not noted in the Green Beret Chronicles. Jocko also did annotate some of this in his initial podcast where he had said this.
Now, does this mean that every single Marine and every single soldier saw this incredible level of coordination and cooperation? Of course not. Can there be someone that might have a different perspective or harbored some kind of animosity or didn't understand how the team worked together? Of course. Look, there's 5,600 people there. There's people in silos. Could there be someone that didn't get the coordination, that missed the meeting, and SEALs roll in there and they didn't know about it? Could that? Yes, absolutely. Is that possible? In fact, it's not just possible, it's guaranteed. Those people are in a small, very extremely small minority. The vast majority of people on the ground understood with great pride the communication, the coordination, the camaraderie that was everywhere on the battlefield.
And I do have to agree with Jocko on this, is that not everybody from the bottom to the top, every Marine, every person that's in this battle space will see every angle, every side of it. There are a lot of hearsay, there's a lot of rumors, there's a lot of stuff that happens. And also there can be a lot of disconnect to the very top, which I did discuss in my last video as well, where there are good story seekers that are out there trying to write history in the most pleasant 2 thumbs up way in the government aspect to show the American population, their government and tax dollars are going to a right place. On top of that, to make sure we don't run into a Vietnam era thing where these guys coming back from what were these, I would say, heroic type positions and looking to serve in the military. And I think there is heroism in that. But I will say that there is a lot of competing space in this that essentially makes this very convoluted. The third debate here is this question here. Eric Deming says that they were operating out of recklessness.
It also means that they were poorly equipped. They didn't have night vision for sure. They certainly didn't have night vision. They didn't actually have flashlights. So they might have like a flashlight for every 3 or 4 guys, but they certainly didn't have weapons mounted lights. They didn't have any helmet mounted lights. They just would have like a flashlight. And you know what we did? Every SEAL probably has 3 or 4 flashlights. And so guys were giving them flashlights so that they could see. When the mission of the partner force that you've been tasked to train and fight doesn't have night vision and operates in the day, what are you going to do? Does it give the enemy a tactical advantage? Yeah, here's the thing. The enemy did not really go out at night in Ramadi very much. I'd say we probably killed less than 1% of the enemy that we killed were at night. They came out in the daytime. That's when they came out. That's their best form of camouflage. Their best form of camouflage wasn't the darkness. It was the civilian populace.
This part of the story is where I believe it to be very true that they would go out during daytime, because it would be a risk to go out without your gear that you would need, especially we were not going to equip the Iraqis with that stuff, because oftentimes, if you have not heard of this, they would take gear from Americans, or they'd be outfitted. They'd even sell it out in town just to pay for food or whatever for their families. So we were being looked at as cash cows if that was the case, and we were not going to do that. You have to want these people to fight for themselves, and essentially that's what we were trying to do, is hearts and minds, baby. Hearts and minds. And this is the part of war that nobody wants to talk about, and I would say is the longest and the messiest. Another thing that they were against was the Chris Kyle 4-corner sniper accusation, which they were saying that people that were around Chris Kyle were entertaining that he was taking out local population, even though that they were maybe friendlies or whatever else. And Jocko does address this as he says this following clip here.
Killing women and children could not have happened. We had relationships with the interim government there, the tribal leaders that were remaining, that were engaged with their people, that were reporting grievances to the coalition leadership, which is, by the way, the battalion and brigade commanders right there in Ramadi, who we were working for. And we had Iraqi soldiers with us on every operation, and Iraqi soldiers out patrolling the streets, and interpreters. I read an article on podcast 434. It's about one civilian that was killed in Ramadi and the repercussions that it caused, including manslaughter charges on American soldier. And yet this claim that rolling off the tongue, oh, everyone knows they were killing civilians. It's disgusting.
It has been no secret, whether it's Afghan, whether it was Iraq, whether it's any type of modern warfare, that the cover, even in current day, has been using children. These have all been fronts of concealment or ability to blend in and make it harder to take control of cities and actually determine who are good or bad guys. A lot of people that have not been in combat, even myself, I look back at people that have talked about their stories. There is no red coats, blue coats. There are no lines of Gettysburg or whatever else that you guys think of, North versus South, or whatever you can think of warfare. That is out the window. That is not in a real way to look at this. The last accusation of this entire thing was that Eric Deming had said that Jocko and fellow other SEALs were in bed essentially with companies that were being utilized for government contracts, and that they were fraudulently being used to market to the SEALs. And essentially they were being awarded the contracts even though they were not the best for the teams, and they felt like they were getting some kind of kickback from this. Jocko goes against this and says this.
About my involvement in an investigation of a contracting issue. And this happened. There was an investigation, not just to me, but of a whole slew of people. And I can tell you what happened. There was a system of martial arts that was part of our training pipeline for a few years. And it wasn't that effective for what we actually needed. So we decided that this block of training was ineffective, and we should replace it with something more like the modern Army combatives or the Marine Corps MCMAC, just something sort of more modern. That contract got removed. No factor. I didn't even think about it. These things happen. Well, the guy who lost the contract was mad about this. He thought it was some kind of conspiracy against him, but he filed a complaint to Congressman Duncan Hunter Jr., and they launched a congressional investigation. Now, I owned my gym at the time, but my gym had nothing to do with these military contracts, nor did I. In fact, no one that got investigated did anything wrong, and the investigators found nothing.
Some of this is why we need 3 vendors or offers or whatever else on contracts, because this type of stuff was going on all the time. On top of that, I would say accusations of that, but I would also go on to the fact of this of like, we don't know how close these contracts were and how they had contacts with Jocko. Like, these communities are small. So if a Navy SEAL got out and decided, I want to do a training on martial arts and be able to train SEALs on this and win big $1 million contracts, they could go do that even though they got out, and that's okay. But then if Jocko's still in and says, we want that guy, I don't know how those are all connected. You would need to do a true investigation. I have to look at those papers and see how they were connected, how the investigation was going. I don't want to speculate on that. If they were already investigated, they're already negative, I have to assume the people that were in CIS or whatever did their due diligence and did their job. My final look at this is there are some very valid points that Jocko did make in his podcast where he said there were more Iraqi soldiers that were there that would have probably turned against them or had other ties to other places that would have loved to use this bad information from Chris Kyle and Jocko as a psyop in order to essentially make the U.S. military look bad, which I would agree that would probably be a great incentive and they'd make money doing it. I believe personally when I look at all of this data, it is messy. But I will say, again, there are a lot of competing things when we look at this. As far as the SEALs are being thrown into a bureaucratic situation in a hearts and minds war mindset where they are not supposed to be operating in, and that is not what they are intended to be doing. There are many people on both sides of the fence of this, and I find myself right in the middle, and I don't want to be a fence setter, but I will say that I would love to see other SEALs come out, talk about this. I will still continue on that I don't know why Eric Deming is not on the Jocko podcast to talk face-to-face about this and squash this entirely. Again, we continue to have fragmentation of the Navy SEAL community, some of the top elite warfighters that are out there on social media because they're fighting over just nuances where I'm like, you guys were on the same team. Why are you guys not using the platform like you should be to raise each other up? Rising tides raise all ships. So why are we fragmenting this between the Jockos, between the David Goggins, between the Dan Crenshaws, between the whatever else? I'm just like, Jesus. Can you guys get along and actually agree for once? But God forbid that ever be the case. But after all this has been presented as the other side, I'm assuming you watched the first video as well, and you watched this. What are your thoughts on this as far as the Jocko Eric Deming situation? And what are your thoughts on the Navy SEAL community as it stands today? As always, if you guys like what I cover here on the channel, hit me up over on Instagram, Snapchat, Twitter, TikTok, or down in the comments below. I love you guys. I'll see you next time.